Welcome to this month's episode of Move the Needle podcast. I am your host, J.R. Ford, one of your co hosts, and we also have Mr. Lee Grigsby with us as well, as you all have come to know and to love. In this month's podcast, we're going to focus on a very interesting subject. Probably most of you probably have not heard of. But we're going to talk a little bit about sundown towns and also about towns that have been erased. So this episode is really going to focus on some of those key topics that probably a lot of the general public are not aware of. And so stay tuned. We're going to talk a bit more about it.
Welcome back from the break, everybody. JR, how you doing, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm alive, healthy, safe. How about yourself?
Man, you know what? That's all you can ask for. So I'm
Yeah,
doing good too, then, because I'm alive, I'm
yeah,
safe, I'm healthy,
yeah.
and that's
I
everything
forgot the
else is
last
bonus.
part. I forgot the last part. Loved,
Yes.
loved.
Well,
Yes. Yep.
I'm not really sure if I'm loved because I don't have any podcast listeners actually sending us messages. No, I'm kidding.
Ah.
Kidding. No, I'm definitely loved. I
Yeah.
feel about
Yeah.
that. But
Everyone
hey,
deserves love. Yeah.
yeah, and hey, listeners,
Yep.
just before we dive into today's, sorry, not today's, but before we dive into this month's episode of Move the Needle, I do want to put out there that we welcome your comments. With each episode, there is a link that you can email us or you can leave a voice comment on anything that you've heard, or if you have questions about what we've said, or if there's something that you want to hear us do an episode on. If you want to join us, send the email, send a message. So I just want to put that out there for our listeners.
Excellent.
The other,
Yeah.
yeah, the other thing I want to do is also put out there that along with being on Spotify, Google, Apple, the main podcast platforms, and some other minor platforms, we are now also on Amazon. So if you get your podcast or music from Amazon, search Live All Good Podcast, and you will find Move the Needle and the other series of the Live All Good Podcast family, the Spotlight series, and the Cruising with the Coaches as well. So
Awesome.
yeah, man, I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Getting on Amazon, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, let's. I think we got to dive right in because this is something that goes to the core of what we talk about when we're
Hmm.
talking about the systemic problems in this country.
Right. Right.
Um, and folks, it's I'm stalling, I guess, because it's hard to talk about. To be
Yeah,
honest,
it's a hard topic.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
being of, of generations of, of being, here in this country, it's something that, I think our generation has really been a witness to, and, generations before us have been directly involved in and have been
absolutely,
recipients of you know of the topics that we're going to talk about, so it's definitely a hard
yeah.
topic to really bring up.
It is, and it's something that is not far removed. It's also
Hmm.
something that people think is stuck to the southern states because
Right.
the southern states had slavery and
Yep.
the Civil War was between the North and the South. So
Right.
the first thing that we're going to talk about is this, and it's not even an idea. So let me not
No.
misspeak on that.
Yeah. Yep.
The the sundown towns.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sundown
Yeah.
town. If you're like, well, Lee, JR, don't really understand what you're talking about as a sundown town.
Yeah.
A sundown town is basically just what it says. It was a town that was known for people of color, black people in particular, but not
Yep.
just black people,
Yeah.
to not be in town once the sun went down.
Right.
That is specifically what they are. There are quite a few studies, man,
Mm-hmm.
about sundown towns, different towns that had anagrams for their name.
Yeah. Yep.
Some towns did not even have anagrams. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I want to put this in perspective real quick because we have an episode coming up, folks, um, that talks about it's an episode coming up about a healthcare provider that's a pillar of a community. That's next month's episode, but I'm bringing it up because of this time frame. Okay,
Yeah.
so by definition, sundown towns were all white communities or neighborhoods, and they excluded black people and
Mm-hmm.
other minorities, right, from
Yeah.
using discriminatory laws, harassment, or threats and violence.
Yeah.
There was, and so there was a book put out
Mm-hmm.
called the Negro Motorist Green Book. Okay,
Yep.
and this was circulated amongst the black community, and this book was to let black people know when they were traveling outside of their own communities what cities they could go to, what maybe rest stops, hotels that were friendly to black people, or
Right.
which towns and things to avoid. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I brought up the upcoming episode right now is because this book was written in 1940.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Isn't that
yeah.
crazy? I mean,
I, I'm gonna
there's
say that.
a there's
I'm,
a
I'm gonna say that
movie. Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say that again
Mm-hmm.
for those who didn't hear that. The
Yeah.
Negro Motorist Green Book was written and published in 1940.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah,
Just crazy. I mean, people who aren't familiar with Green Book, I mean, there was a movie in
yeah,
2018 that that referenced the Green Book, but the Green
exactly.
Book is a real thing.
It's a
It
real
was a
thing.
real thing
Hmm.
that if it that was, I believe, published um back then, that essentially, gosh, what it was, I think it was actually published for what, about like
It
30 years or something like that.
it was. It might
It,
have been. I want to
yeah.
say what I'm looking the particular edition I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was actually established in the late 30s.
Yeah.
So this was a
Yeah.
1940 edition, but yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
was done. It was a book that was published up until at least the Civil Rights Act in
Yeah, that's right.
1965. At least. So yes, that's a good 30 years. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. It's a real thing.
And
It's a
so
real
this
thing.
book, yeah, this book gave African Americans at the time, it gave them kind of these, these safe and trusted locations that they could visit,
Hmm.
and not face discrimination,
Hmm.
or physical violence,
Hmm.
against them, which, in today's world, in perspective, in the general public, you don't think that that is something that could ever come to fruition, but it was
It,
synonymous with
oh my
Jim
God.
Crow.
Oh my God.
If people, yeah, people are familiar with Jim Crow and Jim Crow laws, those laws were put in place to openly discriminate against African Americans, against Latinos, against Asian Americans,
Mm-hmm.
to essentially keep the powers
The power
in
structure, yeah,
place.
the
Yeah,
white
the power structure in place.
the white power structure in place. So also I'm glad you mentioned Jim Crow, right? Because
Yeah.
here's we've I definitely want to touch on at some point. I'm still doing
Mm-hmm.
research, but definitely want to touch on
Mm-hmm.
Reconstruction, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
after Reconstruction failed, okay,
Yep. Yep.
we're talking about a period of the late 1890s, the
Yeah.
1890s until the 60s,
Yep.
1960s. That's a 70-year period of this migration where,
Yeah.
again, Reconstruction had failed. But
Right.
what was going on? There was this migration out of the South up to
Mm-hmm.
the Midwest, out
Yeah.
west,
Yep.
and so in one of these articles that I was reading,
Mm-hmm.
there was estimated 10,000 sundown towns
Wow.
across mostly mostly in the Midwest and the West because of this migration.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep. That's crazy.
10,000 towns, man. So just to give you an example, um, this there's a town in Arkansas. And,
Mm-hmm.
and forgive me because I'm actually reading my notes. I'm looking at my notes because I want to get this right. I don't want to
Yeah.
mess it up.
Yep.
There's a town in Arkansas called Alex, Alix. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
on the sign of their city limits when you entered Alex, it said, "Nigger, don't let the sun go down on you in Alex."
Hmm.
On the
That
sign entering the city limits, that's what it said.
that just it. I can't even fathom what
Seeing that
our
in the
people. Yeah.
1930s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just just thinking of the fear that that invoked and the terror that invoked. And when people talk about terror,
Hmm.
terrorism has been in this country since its inception.
That's absolutely.
Let's not get that confused.
Is is is
Let's
that not terrorism? Right?
right, right.
What is terrorism?
Continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So other signs were
Mm-hmm.
less blatant, right? But they
Yeah.
said whites only after dark.
Yep.
So there's another town in this article that talks about it Edmond, Oklahoma. Okay, Edmond,
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma used different slogans to promote itself, like on postcards, to
Yep.
get people to come to Oklahoma. Okay, and this is
Yep.
and I quote, this was one of the slogans: "A good place to live,
Hmm.
no Negroes." Again, the slogan
Oh
on the
boy.
postcard that this town, Edmond, Oklahoma, used in the
Yeah.
1940s to promote itself for people to move there was "A good place to live, no Negroes." There's
I mean,
another
how?
town. Yeah, right. Oh, go. Yeah, right. Let me give you this last one, and then I'm gonna just
It's
ask you
funny,
about
but
some
it is
Jackson. Yeah,
absolutely not funny. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's well, all you can do is laugh to keep from crying, right?
Yeah.
So, so another town in Arkansas called,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but
Mm-hmm.
Mena, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they used on postcards to promote themselves. Again,
Yeah.
folks, we're talking in the 30s and 40s. We're
Yeah.
we're not talking about pre-Civil War. We're talking
Right.
about post-Civil War,
Yeah.
post-Reconstruction, right? Um,
Modern era. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So this town, Mena, Arkansas, advertised its many charms. Quote, "Cool summers, mild winters, no blizzards, no Negroes." Like,
just out on the signs. Just
yes,
printed out
that's
on the signs.
that's promotional material
Wow.
for people to move there.
Hmm.
Like,
I,
I I don't. I do not understand. So,
Yeah.
having heard these three different towns, I mentioned Alex,
Yeah.
Arkansas. I mentioned Mena, Arkansas, or Mena, Arkansas, and
Hmm.
Edmond, Oklahoma. Those places, I may not be the smartest geographically, but those are not in the South.
Right. Those are
And I know,
Midwest.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there are people who will claim, well, Arkansas is okay. Arkansas can be rural, but it's not
Right.
in the South. It's not
Right.
in the South.
Yeah.
Oklahoma,
It's in the Sun Belt, right?
yeah,
It's
Oklahoma is considered West Midwest,
right.
so we're not talking about southern towns here. You know?
I think for the listeners, you might hear a lot of abrupt, laughs and gaffs about
Mhm.
this, and it's because these things existed in real life
Yeah,
in in this country. You think about all the struggles that African Americans and people of color have had for centuries. And, after, the Civil War and, post, Reconstruction for, what was it,
mhm.
7 years that Reconstruction actually was
Mm,
working to a
yeah,
certain
yeah,
degree.
little bit less, but yeah,
Yeah,
almost 7 years. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, you think about these things and you think about the powers that were in place that helped to even help, but they dissolved all these protections that were just coming into play, about the right to vote, about removing the three-fifths
yes,
regulations
yeah,
on people of color, on the bodies. You think
exactly.
about these things about towns and how separate but equal
Was
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 not
a
a thing.
misnomer. It was a misnomer.
it's, it's not even separate but equal. It's just
Yeah,
we don't want you.
right, right.
You better not be here or else. Let me let me
Yeah.
let me add something else to this
Hmm.
from this article. This one article I
Yeah.
read that also talked about the Green Book, right? And you
Yep.
were correct. The Green Book was
Hmm.
published for about 30 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um so everybody knows Route 66, right? There's a
Yep.
famous
Hmm.
it's a song,
Hmm.
well known state route or route
Yeah.
that goes all
People
the way
people
out west.
take it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Route 66. Okay,
Hmm.
so listen to this statistic here. 44 of the 89 counties along Route 66 had no motels or restaurants or prohibited blacks from entering at dark. That's
Wow.
over half of the counties
Yeah.
on Route 66, basically between what do you call it?
Hmm.
Chicago and LA, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
between these two major cities, half of the counties did not allow black people in restaurants or motels. We're not talking one establishment here. We're talking
Yeah.
counties, entire counties.
Governments. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. I believe it. I don't know how to process that. I don't
Right.
know because I have driven not on
Hmm.
Route 66 that far, but okay,
Yeah.
I've driven from Washington D.C. up to Ohio,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I try to picture myself having to use this green book to
Right.
figure out just for anywhere from a 6 to 8 hour trip,
Yeah.
where am I going to stop for gas? Where am I going
Yep.
to stop for food? What happens if my car breaks down?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
phew.
You have to think about the resolve that travelers had, that people of color had at that time. You know, uh, looking at Reconstruction or post-Reconstruction and seeing separate but equal really not being a thing. There was no equality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you think about just the resilience that our people had at that time to attempt to navigate this country, knowing that
Yeah.
a fair amount of the country was not receptive at
To their
all, not even tolerant.
not receptive to their existence.
Right. Yeah.
Not even not tolerant like of them just being in the
Yeah.
same space.
Right.
Not not tolerant, not receptive to their existence.
Right. For what reason?
Yeah.
For it
For
goes to
for
why.
for misinformation, for deception
Yeah.
of you're lower than because your skin color is different.
Right. Right.
That's it. That's it.
Wow. I mean, think about our grandparents, our great grandparents,
Yeah.
our previous generations who had to endure these things
Yeah.
up front in their
Yeah.
face.
That's what's crazy. So, one
Yeah.
more thing I wanted to mention from this
Hmm.
article,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
The reason that this is so hard to try to find out, right?
Hmm.
These things aren't written down, just as in Jim
Right.
Crow laws, right? And I'm glad you brought that
Right.
up.
Yeah.
There, a lot of the Jim Crow laws are not written. Now,
Hmm.
yes, there are things on the books that are written that are
Right.
systemically racist.
Right.
Jim Crow laws are unspoken, right? So
Right.
these sundown towns are all anecdotal, but
Right.
that's how they remained all white because
Oh yeah.
they passed the anecdotal history down of what they wanted to do or what
Right.
they or who they wanted to keep out. And
Yeah. It
historians have a
was.
hard time
Yeah.
trying to find the towns out, you know?
Oh yeah, you have to go into, I mean there are public records, but they are archived,
Yeah,
and it takes these historians, um,
years.
years to
And,
dig up these records that, you might see on Know Your Roots, or Finding Your Roots,
right.
with Henry Louis Gates.
Mhm.
He has a fantastic show on a PBS that I watch that really digs into some of these types of issues of there not being a substantial, and vast amount of records of these types of sundown towns and
Right. Right.
historical, markers that would indicate, hey, there are, a group of towns in Texas, in North
Mhm.
Texas that you should not go through at all,
Right.
you know,
Well, and
day or night.
and that's the reason that these records are not written down
Yeah. Yep.
because if they were, dare I say, some of them would be illegal,
Yeah.
right? According
Yeah.
to the Constitution, if you want to abide by that after
Yeah.
1965, of course. But
Yeah.
going back to the sundown towns.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you two questions, kind of a pop
Yeah.
quiz here. I don't expect you to know the answer, but I want to
You gonna test
pose
my
it.
black man knowledge?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Now, I didn't know this until I read this article either. Well, this is
Yeah.
a different
Yeah.
article.
Yeah.
But about what year do you think sundown towns started to go out of existence? There are some that
Mm.
still exist today, but
Yeah. As a
what
whole,
as a whole, yes. As
yeah.
in about what year?
I'm gonna guess probably the early 80s.
Wow. Okay.
What do you think?
Would you like to narrow it down anymore?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Any specific
Let's.
year?
I'm gonna say either 1982 or 1984 because I was a youngster in
Hmm.
the early 80s, and I'm thinking that by the early 80s, we as a whole were starting to progress a bit more than, the decades leading up. So I'm gonna guess either 82 or 84.
Okay, well, I mean, until Reaganomics took over, but
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
different podcast for a different day.
Yep, yep. So what's the answer, Professor?
1980. 1980
Wow,
was when they kind of officially started to go away. 1980.
wow. And,
Yeah.
and do you have what were some of the reasons why they started to, I guess, kind of dissolve?
Well, I think that isn't really talked about in this article,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it does point towards more racial inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, some of the laws that were unwritten
Yeah.
as we began to progress a little bit more. So
Economically, yeah.
yes, so those
Yep.
things had to start going away. You know,
Right.
but
Right.
there were still these unwritten rules
Yep.
in these sundown towns. Okay, here's
Mm.
question
Okay.
number two. Question number two.
Okay.
So I know I mentioned the three specific towns, the two
Mm-hmm.
in Arkansas and the one in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry, if you get this one wrong, I got a bonus question.
All right.
But so, what state do you think in this? We will exclude southern states. So we're
Okay.
talking, um, I guess, eastern states, eastern or
Yep.
northeastern states,
Okay.
Midwest, West. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In what state or states do you think most of these sundown towns existed?
Hmm. I'm gonna go with maybe New York State. It's a pretty large northeastern state.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, Probably Massachusetts.
Hmm.
And if I go a little west,
Okay.
I'm gonna say uh, either Ohio or Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well, surprising, and we will touch on New York
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
in our next segment.
Yep.
But no, the state you had to go a little bit more west, sir. And we're
Okay.
also going to touch on Ohio because there is a
Yeah.
town, a town that
Mm-hmm.
is grappling with its history of being a sundown town even to this day.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Um, but
Ah,
Illinois had 500 sundown towns alone.
that is insane.
Illinois itself had 500 sundown towns.
Are you telling me that you could throw a dart on the
Yes,
state of Illinois and hit a sundown town with fairly consistent targeting?
that is exactly what I'm telling you.
That's
So,
crazy.
so I want to put this in perspective. Again, mentioned the states of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Illinois.
Yeah.
There's others, right?
Yep. Yep.
I'll get to the bonus question, but
Yeah.
the perspective that I really want to point out here is when we look at voting trends,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to go off on the rails here about
Mm-hmm.
the voting laws that are happening now or restrictions.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
when we look at voting trends, I
Mm-hmm.
hope the listeners now understand why the
Mm-hmm.
majority of urban areas
Yeah.
are black and brown people.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
that the other thing that popped up to me was you
Hmm.
mentioned Illinois, Arkansas.
Hmm.
I think did you didn't
I
mention
mentioned Oklahoma.
Mississippi,
No, I did not miss
Oklahoma.
Mississippi. Oklahoma. Hmm.
So I guess, a part of the Green Book in its creation and evolution,
Hmm.
one of the things that pops up in my mind about that 30-year period
Hmm.
is that there was the Great Migration that was taking place.
That's
You
exactly when it
you
happened.
had families, African American families that
Mhm.
were moving from the South up to the North and out West
Correct.
for better economic opportunities.
Correct. Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was part of the reason that, and I believe his name was Victor Green. Um,
Yeah.
that is a majority of the reason why he came up
Yep.
with the Green Book. You know,
Mm. Yep.
and
Yep.
it's wow. Just hearing and saying that perspective
Yeah.
again. We're sitting here talking not too long ago, man.
Right. We're talking two generations, maybe one. There are people
Barely,
who are still alive. Yeah.
yeah,
My
barely two
yeah.
generations. Not even. You know,
Yeah. Mike.
who
Yeah.
lived this? Yeah. So again, I want our listeners to understand when
Mm-hmm.
you're starting to put everything in context and you're putting all this together, what we talk about.
Right.
The reason the voting trends are the way they are, the reason urban areas, if they don't
Are
haven't
the
gone,
way they are. Yeah.
or if they haven't gone through gentrification, that's
Right.
another podcast for another day.
Yeah. Yep.
But if they haven't gone through gentrification, the reason that these urban areas are black and brown people is because a lot of these sundown towns,
Yeah.
if you were brave enough to leave the city, it was literally taking your own life at risk.
Right.
You
Yeah.
were
I
you
mean,
were at risk if you left the
yeah.
city limits.
Yeah. If you were looking for economic prosperity and you were moving to an urban area such as Chicago,
Right, right.
or St. Louis, anything probably up and down the Mississippi River,
Hmm. And
those cities, yeah,
traveling
and
in between
traveling
them.
abroad, yeah,
Yeah,
traveling in between those,
yeah.
you had a finite area that was available to you. And what were those? Those were urban areas that had, fixed income or, lower economic, areas such as the projects,
Yep.
and we'll probably talk about that too. But, those were areas that were concentrated on purpose. And you have to ask yourself,
Why?
why? Why do we have projects? Why do we have a green book?
Well,
Those are questions. Yeah.
and I also want to mention this. So again, putting
Hmm.
this in context, right? We're
Yep.
talking about looking at voting trends and why that
Right.
happened.
Right.
The whole idea and practice of redlining. Okay, what is redlining?
Yeah.
Redlining was literally drawing the urban districts in
Right.
red
Yep.
that they were not going to give funding to.
Right.
So
And
not only do
and
you have,
who?
yeah, so
Yeah.
not only do you have these sundown towns, first of all, right?
Hmm.
Now you're concentrating the black people in urban areas.
Yeah.
Now, in the neighborhoods that they're in, you're drawing the boundaries so that there's no governmental funding, whether it's city, state,
Right.
local, federal. That's what redlining was. So
Yeah.
we're now talking about the lack of generational wealth.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
if you had, again, you said two generations, right?
Hmm.
Any one of our white counterparts who are our age could
Yeah.
possibly have had grandparents who,
Yeah.
again, let's even say this: they could have been
Yeah.
immigrants, right? That's fair
Yeah. Oh
because a
yeah.
lot of people came over here looking for a better life.
Yeah.
So they were working either, let's say they're working in a rural area in one of these sundown
Right.
towns, working in a coal
Yeah.
mine, working at a
Hmm.
factory. But guess what?
Yep.
They ended up owning their house, owning the land that the house was on, passed it down to the next generation. That land has now been in that family for two generations.
Right. Right.
If you
There's
don't have
already, yeah,
access to
there's
that,
generational wealth that's being built up,
exactly.
and let's also preface that with, it was not everyone who was able to have upward mobility. It it
True.
it it was a majority of people, of white people, European descent who
Mm-hmm.
had the opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading gosh, a few years about the different types of settlements that were or grants that were given to immigrants, European immigrants across the
Yes,
country. That's why you have a concentration of Scandinavian, immigrants from the early 1900s who settled in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest.
that's
You
right.
also have the same thing in Maryland, where there were German settlements that were afforded
Correct.
to those immigrants. The same
Correct.
thing was not available to African Americans.
Correct.
That's something that is not generally known.
I'm,
Why?
I'm telling you, there are reasons, but this is all
Yeah,
factual stuff. I want our listeners to be really clear.
yeah,
You don't have to take our word for it. This
yes,
information is readily available if you dig under the surface a little bit.
right.
That's
Yep,
that's typically what we do in order to talk about it, in order to
yeah,
bring it to you on an episode. But
right,
this information is out there. This is not hidden information.
right.
Um,
You just have to go
some
seek it out. I mean,
some of it takes a little bit harder to find, of course.
yeah,
So,
yep, yep, yep,
um,
exactly.
okay, so I do have one more state that I want to mention, um,
Yep.
and then I'll talk about there's a city in Ohio that I'll talk about
Hmm.
before we break. But
Hmm.
the bonus question, sir, there is a city. Let's see. Should I give you the city name or should I give you the state? Which would you prefer?
Okay.
I'll give you the choice.
Um,
The bonus
give me
question.
the city. Give me the city. Give me the city.
Okay. Okay. I will give you the name of the city. I
Okay.
will ask you which state it's in and
Yes.
what the name of the city stands for.
Okay.
There's also a book about sundown towns too, by the way.
Yeah.
I'd
Yep.
have to. I don't remember the author. It is on my
Yeah.
list, but I have to
Yep.
make it through the reconstruction book first.
Yeah. Can we put it in the show notes?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep. Awesome.
So the city of the town that I'm talking of is Anna. A
Anna.
Anna.
Oh boy.
What
And
state do you think that would be in? And again, we are excluding southern states. We're
mm-hmm.
talking Midwest, West, and
Midwest.
some northern eastern states.
Okay.
But Anna,
Anna.
a town called
Anna.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go with, well, you already said there are over 500 sundown towns in Illinois itself.
Okay,
So,
okay.
um, can you give me kind of a lukewarm or a hot and cold
I'll
type of
I'll
situation?
I'll give
Okay,
you a hint.
okay.
It is the Midwest. It is in the Midwest.
Okay.
I'll
All
give you
right. I will go with what's next to what's next to Illinois? Is that we got Michigan up to the north.
that.
What do we have next to that? Is that Wisconsin is a little far or a
Like
little it's
that's like northwest of
one
Illinois.
north,
Yeah.
yeah, northwest. Okay. Is it Kansas and I'm getting my geography wrong
I
here,
get you.
but
No, you've named a lot of Midwest states. Okay,
Nebraska. I'm gonna go with Nebraska.
you're gonna go in Nebraska. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the state that Anna is in is
Mm-hmm.
Indiana.
Ah, okay.
Indiana. So
Yep.
again, we're talking about. I'm from Midwest, folks. So
Yes.
Ohio, Indiana, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Now it makes so much more sense. These
Yeah.
things do not surprise me, knowing where
Right.
I'm from and where I grew up.
Yeah.
Um, for bonus points, would you like to guess what Anna, Indiana stands for?
Oh boy. Uh, I will take a swag.
Okay.
Um, and for people who don't know what a swag is, it's a I think it's a stupid, wild. wild guess, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah, yeah.
something, yeah, yeah,
Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Stupid wild
Anna,
accidental guess.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna go with against Negroes. Uh, I think that's as far as I can go with that.
As far as you can
Against
go. Okay.
Negroes, yeah, anti-Negro. I don't know what the other part of the NI. It sounds like a what is it?
It's definitely an anagram. It's definitely an
Yeah,
anagram.
an anagram. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So
Am I
that's
close?
you're close. You're close. That's
Okay.
part of what this book addresses too. The
Mm-hmm.
Sundown Towns, but
Yeah.
Anna, Indiana stands for "Ain't No Niggers Allowed."
Ah. Okay. I was being too PC about it. I was like the anti-Negro.
No, because you
Never
again,
again.
we're talking,
They were
late.
pretty explicit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they
Yeah.
were not. Yeah, they didn't hide it. They didn't hide it at all.
Wow. That's
So
that's just That's just crazy.
Anna, Indiana. Yes. So real quick, I want to mention a town in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
This is as of 2010.
Yeah.
Okay, as of 2010 on the United States Census in Utica, Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
97% of their citizens identified as white.
Yep.
And so they started wondering, well, wait a minute. How how is it that we are just like one set of people here?
Right.
And since that census, they started understanding that Utica was one of the sundown towns.
Oh, so they had
Yeah,
to do a little bit of digging
they
in their
they
own little closets.
yeah, yeah, they started doing some research in their own
Yeah.
city and started realizing a lot of different things. So they are definitely dealing with having been a
Yeah.
sundown town.
Yeah.
Um, but like for instance, I believe back in the 1900s,
Hmm.
maybe 1910, they had. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is still in the 60s.
Hmm.
They had one black barber serving all of the black citizens in Utica,
Oh boy. I'm sure
right?
he had a lot of stories to share.
Yeah. Well.
Oh my
Then
God.
there's another instance they're talking about in 2015.
Yeah.
Um, letters were sent to Utica High School
Hmm.
because their school flag, I believe,
Yeah.
had images of the Confederate flag in it.
That's not surprising.
Right.
I
But
mean,
but
speaking of it nowadays, but
but we're also talking about a Midwestern city. See,
yeah.
I want people to understand this was not just relegated to southern states. You see,
Right. Right.
people would say, "Oh
Yep.
yeah, well that's Maryland, Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama."
Hmm.
No, this is
No.
Ohio. This is Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, Utica has been dealing with their history, but I will say I'll try to
Hmm.
put a link to the article or something like that. But
Yeah.
like that's what I think the country has to unfortunately embrace, right?
Yeah. And
Are
continue to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, are we sitting here saying that things are like all white people are racist? No, that's not what we're
No.
saying. Never would say
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
But the core of this country was founded on white supremacy foundation.
Right. On the premise that white people were superior
Yeah,
and this was the way of life, moving forward with the evolution of the country.
and
In
there's
order
just
for us to prosper,
mhm,
it came from the powers that be and who ran the country, who
the
ran state and local
founding
government.
the founding fathers. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
And it's not anyone of today's, it's not anyone's fault today, but we've
no,
all grown up in this.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know? Yep.
But if you don't, here's the problem. If you don't recognize
Mm-hmm.
and um, acknowledge your
Yeah.
past, right? We all know what it's like to make mistakes as humans
Right.
and as
Right.
people. And
Yeah.
if you don't acknowledge them, then you're doomed to repeat them.
Yeah.
And so, as a whole, as a country, we want to continue to whitewash over what has been.
Yeah.
But if we continue to do that, we can't move forward into what we can be. And
Right.
that's the problem. That's the problem.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Man.
Wow.
Yeah. So man, JR, let's take a break, man.
Yeah.
Let's kind of shake off some of the heaviness from sundown towns because we got something
Yeah.
a little bit heavier to talk about after the
Yeah.
break. So
Sounds good.
folks, stay tuned. We're gonna take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back from the break. Um, wow. I hope you were able to digest everything that we kind of put out there with the sundown towns in the first segment. Um, and by all means, please do research, dig deeper.
Yep.
When this episode airs, I'll try to also put the book out there that talked about like places like Anna, Indiana. Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is important information to bring about awareness of what has been so that we don't continue to repeat the same mistakes or so we
Right.
don't hold on to misinformed versions of how the country was formed and how it's gotten to
Yeah.
where it is. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a
We
lot
didn't
of
just get here today.
yeah, yeah. It didn't just happen. There's a lot of
Yeah.
distorted versions that people want you to
Yeah.
think are true.
Right.
Use, if anything, information, education is power.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
in light of sounding like an after school special, the
For
the
those younger generations, after school specials were after school programs that you could watch that would give you a message, you know?
literally right, right. It it,
Yeah.
it literally. Well, wait a minute. Isn't there? There's one of those after school specials that's I'm just a bill, right? Like it was about a
Yeah. Oh
house.
boy.
Yeah, yeah. We no. That's, that's a whole nother topic. Whole nother topic.
I know. I know.
But yeah, this is another tough one. But so shout out first of all to Amber Ruffin. Um,
Mm,
if you
yeah.
don't know who she is, the Amber Ruffin Show is awesome. Um,
Yeah.
Black lady who uses think of the Daily Show type format where
Yeah.
she hits you with fact after fact after fact, mixes in sarcasm and comedy,
Yeah.
but she gives you factual information about
Yeah.
what's going on in this country. Okay.
Right. Right.
So shout out to Amber Ruffin. There was one of her shows where she pointed out um, some towns, some American cities, American towns that were either destroyed or buried by lakes or natural
Yeah.
or became a park.
Yeah.
Um, they were referred to as drowned towns,
Mm,
and there's one that is kind of famous. Um, so right now it's Lake Lanier. Okay.
mm.
Um, so if you don't mind, Jr., I've got
Yeah.
five of them that I want to point out. Okay.
Go for it. Yep.
So obviously, as I said, from Amber Ruffin show, her episode about this, the first, probably most popular one is Lake Lanier, right? This
Hmm.
is in Georgia.
Yeah.
The town that Lake Lanier covers is called
Yeah.
or was Oscarville. Okay,
Mm. Yep.
it was a black town, and it was burnt down in 1912.
Wow.
The the citizens, or not citizens, but the residents were, so the black residents of
Mm-hmm.
Oscarville were
Mm-hmm.
forced to flee from rape allegations of two teenagers who lived there, and
Wow.
they were accused of raping and murdering a white woman named May
Mm.
Crow. Okay,
Yeah.
so you can imagine the free for all that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I believe both teenagers were put in jail. They Then the mob came and got them. They were dragged out, beaten, and lynched
Oh
um,
my
from a
gosh.
telephone pole. Okay,
Jeez.
but so after this,
Mm-hmm.
so also want people to know that there were other groups, I guess,
Yeah.
other than the Ku Klux Klan that did this.
Mm-hmm.
This group was called the Night Riders. Okay,
Oh wow.
so the Night Riders were the ones that had come and dragged these kids, these teenagers, out of jail, lynched them,
Mm.
but then they began to force all of the other black families out of Oscarville.
Out.
Okay,
Wow.
once the black families were gone,
Yeah.
lit fire, burned it down.
Yeah.
So like that, Lake Lanier is like a recreation spot. You
Yeah.
know, people are boating and fishing and all that. It it is on top of a town. Yeah, I don't even have
Wow.
words. I don't even have words.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Jeez.
Yeah, yeah. And so
Um.
now everybody's like,
Yeah.
okay, now we're not surprised because you're talking about the South. Well,
Mm-hmm.
just hold that thought, because
Yeah.
I also want our listeners to understand it is never just about Southern states,
Right.
or it's never just about the South. It
Yeah.
is about the country as a whole. We
Yep.
are. I want to make this point. I've
Yep.
probably made it several times before. That again, and you said it right when we came after the break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This didn't just happen, but we're all
Yeah.
in this together, also, right?
Right.
So our goal here with Move the Needle is to really dig a little deeper and uncover these things that you wouldn't normally know or talk about.
Yeah.
Because
To
once you
shine a
know,
light. Yeah.
yeah, once you find out about them, once we shine the light on these things, it's hard to unknow them. It's hard to get past them.
Yeah.
But then that's going to make you deal with it so that we can be better and move
Yeah.
forward into what we can be and should be.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah. I mean, you really brought it home. Was saying that it just wasn't the South.
right.
The
It's,
Northeast, the
yeah,
the the Upper Midwest.
yeah.
These were not just kind of bastions of progressive liberalism.
Dude,
In Massachusetts.
we talked
This is
about
yeah.
Illinois having 500 sundown towns.
That's crazy.
Like,
Just
like literally, you said you can look at a map and throw a
yeah.
dart. You close your eyes, literally, throw a dart, and
Yeah.
probably hit a sundown town. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that's
Wow.
great.
All right.
That, yeah.
What's number two? What's number
Okay,
two?
number two is I don't know how to pronounce this. I
Hmm.
think the original name was called Cowaliga, but it's called
Okay.
Benton, Alabama.
Okay. Yeah.
So the lake that is built on this town is Lake Martin. Okay, this
Mm.
is
Yeah.
the black town was called Cowaliga.
Okay.
It it was home to the first black owned railroad station that was
Mm.
started by William Benson. He
Ah.
he also had a school called the Black School Cowaliga Academic and Industrial Institute. Okay,
Wow. Wow.
he William Benson was the son of
Hmm.
John Benson, who was a slave but then freed.
Wow.
So
Mm.
yeah, they had made their way from Florida to Alabama, and
Yeah.
they had purchased thousands of acres of land, sold it to black
Wow.
families, for black families to have this land, develop this land, have a community, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. That's
so
all I can
clear.
say is,
Yeah. Right.
you know,
So
yep.
so clearly after John Benson died, and after his son William died,
Hmm.
the town Cowaliga was destroyed to make room for Lake Martin.
Wow.
It was
That's
destroyed to make
crazy.
room for Lake Martin, right?
That's
Not
crazy.
right, right, right.
I
Like,
mean, with these lakes, with these bodies of water, I mean,
mhm.
were they a part of, kind of these towns that were, or these in, recreational areas that were created because of, certain parts of the rivers that were being dammed up, and they were, you know, basically creating these new geographical areas. Is that
No,
a
that's
part of it?
from the research that I've been able to do so
Yeah,
far.
yeah.
Everything that I've seen leads
Hmm.
to we're creating something to cover up what was done.
Oh,
That's
wow.
again, I'm not saying that's
Yeah,
the only reason, but
yeah,
so far I've not found any supporting evidence
yeah.
as to like, hey, we got to build this freeway through here, so we need to.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, no, 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 no.
Yeah,
There, or
yeah. We
we're
know
laying
about
the
eminent
railroad.
domain. Yeah,
Right, right. No,
yeah.
no, no. I've not seen anything to
No.
support anything other than we're covering up what we've done. We're
Wow.
de- we're we're literally destroying any existence of
Yeah.
this town or this record of this. Yeah, yeah,
Again, just unimaginable. Just
yeah,
unimaginable.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save this third city for last. I'm gonna save that
Mm-hmm.
because I
Okay.
think that's really gonna throw people off.
Okay.
So third is another southern city.
Yep.
I believe it's called Susanna, or Susanna, Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like what was that, Cowaliga,
Yeah.
Susanna was flooded just like Lake Martin. Okay,
Yeah.
so according now, I believe this one was a lot harder to find because there's very few records about this.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess this is like maybe a book or something, but called according to Alabama Living,
Yeah.
there were 900 bodies that were moved from cemeteries before they flooded the land. So
Wow.
there was already a cemetery that had records of people buried. Okay,
Yeah.
so this town was known for mining gold. It had two mercantiles, a grist mill,
Yeah.
flour sawmill, blacksmith shop, and a church.
Oh, just a
Yeah,
thriving town.
a thriving community of
That's
no,
crazy.
a thousand black people. Yeah,
Yeah.
Susanna, Alabama was pretty much flooded, just like
Yeah.
Cowaliga was. So
Like
that it
records were
became,
erased. Like
yeah,
all existence of these
yep,
communities were completely just erased from history.
exactly.
Wow.
So these last two,
Mm-hmm.
I've saved them because they are not in the South. Okay,
Yeah. Yep.
this next one, this one kind of threw me for a loop.
Okay.
This one is Vanport, Oregon.
Oregon.
That was my reaction too. That was my
Yeah.
reaction too. But
Okay.
again, so remember we talked about the Great Migration and we talked about the
Mm-hmm.
Green Book and everything from
Yeah.
the segment. I think that's how this is tied in because there was a labor shortage because of World War II.
Right.
So the Great Migration had a lot of black people moving west and moving to the Midwest from the
Yeah.
South.
Yep.
Well, there was a neighborhood. The new workers needed a place to stay, and they
Mm-hmm.
were staying in the Albina neighborhood, which was the only place black people could live legally. Okay, Le- legally, Le-
Legally. Oh
yeah.
boy. Yep.
So this neighborhood became too small because
Yeah.
a lot of people were coming. So
Right.
they built this temporary housing in
Mm-hmm.
Vanport. This is really gonna blow your mind. At the peak of Vanport's existence, it
Yeah.
was about 40,000 residents. 40% of them were black, right?
Wow. In
Yeah,
Oregon?
in Oregon, dude. And
Yeah,
we're
for people who don't
talking
know, Oregon is one of the whitest states
and
in the country.
we're talking again in the 40s, not even in the
Yeah.
50s yet, right?
Yep. Yep.
So 40% black.
Yes.
So
Wow.
there
Wow.
was there was massive flooding in the neighborhood in
Mm-hmm.
1948. There was a massive
Yeah.
flood.
Yeah.
The city officials, and I quote, like this is research.
Mm-hmm.
The city officials did not warn the residents about the dangerous water levels.
Oh,
They did not
that's
warn them
criminal.
on
That is
purpose.
completely criminal.
Yes. So obviously, many of them did not evacuate in time. Okay.
Yeah.
The town was erased within a day because of this massive flooding.
Wow.
There were about, what they say, about 18,000 families were displaced. A
Hmm.
third of those were black families that were displaced from Vanport, Oregon.
Wow.
Today, this is known as Delta Park.
Wow. So they
Yeah,
turned it into a park.
correct. Delta Park is where Vanport, Oregon used to be.
That
Yeah.
Now, listeners, I know that this is probably a very educational experience for you all, and it's educational for both of us too, and it
Hmm.
should be alarming. It should give you pause, right?
Hmm.
It should give you this reaction, and you feel free to feel the way that you do, but it this should give you some type of reaction,
What?
and just
Hmm.
understanding the feelings that come with learning about these different facts, because
Hmm.
this was real. These things did happen.
This,
And
yeah,
and I go
this is
back
not
to,
this is not a movie. It's not
yeah,
fake.
and I go back to my basic question of why?
Hmm.
Why
Hmm.
did this happen?
Yeah, like,
So,
so you're to
yeah.
your question, in
Mm-hmm.
Vanport, Oregon, why
Mm-hmm.
would the city officials not tell the residents who moved there in order
Yeah.
to become part of the labor force?
Right. To be a
And
part of the
and
community.
and
Yeah.
because they outgrew the only legal neighborhood they were in, so
Yeah.
they built temporary housing,
Yeah.
probably on a known floodplain. Now that
Yeah.
I hear that, right?
Yep.
Why would they
Yep.
not tell them that, hey, the water is rising, there is a massive flood coming, you need to evacuate?
Right.
Now, if
Oh
if
boy.
you tell them that and they don't evacuate, that's their choice.
Yeah.
But to purposely not tell them, okay,
That's criminal. Yeah. That
yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
And I have to, I'll say this. This is
Hmm.
what has been difficult for me in reading in researching Reconstruction era,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it is it's imperative that my mission now, and you've
Hmm.
become part of that mission too,
Hmm.
we cannot fail in what I call Reconstruction 2.0, which is now.
Right.
We
Right.
cannot fail. It is incumbent on us to bring these things to the forefront so that we do not repeat them. I
Right.
cannot, we're only talking about 5 different towns here that will have been erased.
Right.
Like, there's no record. The records are so far and few in between. You don't know who's who. You
Right.
don't. You barely know. Like, the facts that I'm finding, I can't tell you how long it's taken to find the little bit that I found. You know
Right. And my question is, why?
Wow.
Why do we have to dig so deep into
Hmm.
those historical records, or the lack thereof? Because a large part of our history as African Americans has been either been oral, it's been oral history that has been passed down through generations, or it has been just, you know, just erased
Pe-
completely.
yeah, and we have to piece it together, but
Right,
with what records? As we start to
right,
lose our elders, that's
right.
definitely how we lose history. You
Yeah,
know.
when you lose these towns, you lose
Hmm.
any connective tissue to the community that was there, the
Hmm.
people who built those communities, who helped those communities thrive, you
Hmm.
know? So
Hmm.
it,
Yeah,
oh boy,
yeah.
yeah,
It's heavy. It's heavy.
it's heavy. It's heavy.
So so this one really got my goat because I
Yeah.
never would have guessed this one. The last town, the
All
fifth
right.
town
All
started.
right. Lay it on me.
Everybody knows good old New York City, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is
Mm-hmm.
what is one thing, one famous thing that New York City's known for?
The Statue of Liberty.
True. You know, good.
The
I'm
Empire State
I'm
Building.
I'm glad to
Yeah.
say that those things did not cover any towns. I'm glad to say
Okay.
that.
All right. All right.
What I will tell you is
Yeah.
New York City is famous for Central Park, right?
Yes. Yep.
So hold on, folks. I am not telling you that the entire Central Park is covering an erased town,
Yeah.
but the western part of Central Park, the western edge, um,
Mm-hmm.
according to the research here, between 82nd and 89th Street. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
back in
Yep.
the 1840s, this was Seneca Village. Okay,
Hmm.
back in the 1840s,
Mm-hmm.
half of the black people who lived there owned their own property.
Mm.
They owned their own property. Okay.
They were
That,
landowners.
yes, guess what?
Yeah.
That was 5 times higher than the rate of the average person.
Wow.
So we had landowners in the 1840s in Seneca Village.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason that Seneca Village was torn down
Mm-hmm.
in 1857 was to create Central Park.
A park. A park.
Hmm. Yep. So
Oh.
I'm gonna say this, I guess, and I'm using every bit of sarcasm I can right now. So
Yeah.
this says in 2001 there was a plaque that dedicated dedicated to this lost Seneca Village. Okay,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I take that the very same way that Juneteenth became a national holiday.
Right.
And hang with me, folks. I know people are gonna be like, "Wait, what? You don't appreciate that?" Well, hold on. It's not that Juneteenth shouldn't be a holiday, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the best you can do
Right.
is give us Juneteenth when there's 5 different things I can rip off the top of my head that are more important than making Juneteenth a national holiday. Number
Right.
one. Number
Yeah.
two, there should never have had to have been a commemorative plaque in 2001 because Seneca Village never should have been destroyed in 1857.
Right. Right.
That's why
They
I use
they
the
were,
sarcasm.
yeah, they were landowners. That was private property.
Owned their own property.
Yeah.
More than half of the people in Seneca Village the black people in Seneca Village owned their own property.
Hmm.
And it was torn
Hmm.
down to make Central Park.
Just
That is
crazy.
not in the South by any stretch.
No. No, that is in the liberal north.
Hmm. Yep. So
And we
yeah,
laugh because that's
uh,
one of our coping mechanisms. You know,
yeah.
as a community, as people of color, it's one of the things. I mean,
You have
you
to
know,
smile and keep going. You know.
yeah, we have this resolve with us that, you know, our people, our ancestors have been through so much that nowadays when we see, some of the atrocities that continue to happen, we shake our heads and we already know what's happened. It's people who are just coming into the fore
Mm-hmm.
that are, getting their eyes, are opening up their eyes and understanding that this is going on. Like it's been
It,
going on.
and been going on for generations.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
generations, we're talking here. You know.
And yeah, and one of the things that and I brought this up during the break was
Mm-hmm.
because these things are gaining a lot of media attention over the last few years with some of the protests and social uprising,
Mm-hmm.
and you're seeing a lot more white people who are stepping up, and supporting the African American community. There's a flip side to that. There are people in this country who still believe that black people are inferior, that we are not equal, that why should we unearth these things when things are going just the way that they are? They're going fine for the majority, which are white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's why should we care?
Mm-hmm.
These things we see on the news, they pop up, for a few weeks or a few months and then it goes away. It,
Right.
it does not affect them.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone goes back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
These are atrocities that have continued for decades, for generations.
Generations since, well, dare I say, since the inception of this country.
Right. Right.
That's
And there are people who don't want things to change.
right.
There are people who don't want
Yeah.
to give full voting access to
Mm-hmm.
lawful citizens. That's why
Mm-hmm.
you see all these different voting rights restrictions in place that are supposed to help secure
The hours.
the elections and redistricting of different parts of the country and in counties. These
Mm-hmm.
are all in place because people don't want to see change, and change is continuing to happen whether people like it or not, and it's
Yeah.
making people uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep. And the only way to grow, I'm glad you say that, because the only way to
Hmm.
grow from from anything, whether it's
Hmm.
an individual, whether it's a group, or whether it's a country,
Yeah.
is to get out of that comfort zone and be
Yeah.
uncomfortable, because that's when you're going to open up to become better.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's how that happens.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you know, it is this is tough research to do. It's tough research for many reasons. Obviously, the
Yeah.
records are far and few between, but
Right.
just to imagine um,
Hmm.
what people had to go through, you know,
Right. I
and
can imagine it.
I cannot either. And I want to say this: I will openly admit that I have had a great life and been blessed and been privileged to a degree, more
Yeah.
than most, you know?
Yep. Yep.
So part of my mission with what I do as a coach, or what we're doing here with Move the Needle,
Yeah.
is also being a voice for
Hmm.
those who have not had the same opportunities as me. Now, do I let that control my actions? No, I do not. Do I understand that things are definitely more difficult for me and I have to go through more hoops, if you will, because of my
Right.
skin color? I absolutely do understand that. But that is the whole point of Move the Needle. If we can move that needle, sorry for the cliche, one more
Hmm.
notch, that
Yeah.
is the point for that next generation to then take the reins from where we left off, because
Right.
that's what we are doing from the generation before us,
That's right.
you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, man.
Hmm.
Well, JR, man,
Yeah.
a hugely deep-seated episode. But is there anything? I think you had a drop the mic moment. You left it out there for our
Yeah,
listeners, man. Yeah.
I think going back to the question of why, why should we care about these things that have happened in the past?
Mm-hmm.
Because you mentioned it earlier, we're destined to repeat it if we don't acknowledge what has happened and start to change. We look at these things that have happened over the course of the history of this country,
Mm-hmm.
and we see that there are, that there are people who don't want to see change
Mm-hmm.
and have a different perspective on life, and if it disrupts them and inconveniences them, and I'm talking about people at state and local government, and people
Mm-hmm.
who have the ability to to help make the change.
Mm-hmm.
If those people don't care about people who don't look like them or people who don't come from their community, what is
Mm-hmm.
the incentive for them to help bring this country forward?
Absolutely. All right, you guys. We thoroughly appreciate you listening to this latest episode of Move the Needle. And again, we open it up. If you're listening to this, feel free to click the link, leave a comment. Um, if you feel inclined to support our effort, there is a link for that as well. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Google, Apple, under Live All Good. It's a family of podcasts. Move the Needle is monthly. You can also find us on Amazon now. Man, JR, until next time, man, we'll bring you more information, more awareness. Stay well, my friend, and we will keep doing what we have to do.